Welcome, everyone. I'm Rebecca Holland. I work for Avertac, and I work with Jamie and Lee and Wayne and Miles and some other folks. And I'm a vocational rehabilitation coordinator, and very happy to be with you today. Jamie Emanuel, Lee Gashioma are also here, which both work for Avertac. We're always glad to have all of us here to support the webinars. And so I don't want to take a whole lot of time in the introduction because I want to give our guest speakers opportunity to really share what they've done and this amazing, the tools and the products that they've developed. But I do want to say just a couple things. So I met Greg through email last summer, and he is from Raising the Floor, which is a nonprofit organization. And he and his organization really quickly became connected to Avertac, really as an incredible resource that we saw that could be provided to the TVR programs across the country. And we're really delighted to have him and his colleague Crystal with us today to talk about the nonprofit Raising the Floor and two free, you heard me correctly, free and open source tools that they've developed to anyone who needs accommodation, and they're going to be showing how the accommodation works. These tools, one of them is called Morphic, the other is AT On Demand, and Greg and Crystal are going to talk a whole lot more about it and demonstrate. But let me introduce just very shortly the two guests. So Greg is the director of the Trace Research and Development Center. He's professor at the University of Maryland and president of the nonprofit Raising the Floor. He's been active in the field of technology and disability for 50 years, which is really hard to believe since he, started when he was about 4 years old. I'm sure he'll
1971.
But he's a pioneer in the field of augmentative communication, and that's a term originating from his writings. He's a pioneer in assistive technology and computer access. His work can be found in every Windows, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android computer, phone, or tablet, as well as in kiosk, ticket machines, and more across the country. So he's extremely famous. I also have a personal connection with him because he worked with my husband to really help get some accommodations for him through Morphic. And my husband is a teacher and he needed some specific accommodations. And so there's a personal side to this as well, in which he really helped in that process. Crystal is the program manager at Raising the Floor, and she oversees project planning, coordination, and implementation. She's also involved in dissemination, outreach, research efforts. She holds a Master of Science degree in Human Computer Interaction from the University of Maryland, and she has a Bachelor of Arts degree in psychology from the University of Miami. So we are thrilled to have them with us. And now I'm going to toss this over to them and let them really show us what they're doing.
Thank you very much. That was very for the very warm welcome. Let me share my screen here to start out. And as we do this, everyone, as Miles mentioned, feel free if during the presentation you have a question to ask the question on chat or just pop in and say, could you say that again? Or I didn't quite understand that. Or, how would that apply this way or that way? This is meant to be a conversation. We're trying to share some information about the tools, but also some of the things we've learned about trying to help those that there are those among us that have disabilities who are served well. And there are those among us who aren't aware of, or the pieces aren't there, or They're not in a place where there are a lot of resources. And that's the particular focus that we're trying to look at is how do we make sure that we are able to reach out and serve those that we haven't been able to serve in the past. Um, Raising the Floor, the whole name of the organization was formed with the idea of those people that have the least, that are the least connected, that they don't have resources near them, but that have the same needs. Can we raise the floor? Can we raise the base of what's available to them? And so that's going to be the focus of what we're talking about today. Um, Now, there's sort of three things we'll be talking about. We're going to throw an extra one in that we didn't talk about before. One of them is the basic Morphic bar, and this just makes computers and assistive technology a lot easier to use. Then we have AT on demand, and this allows people who need AT to have their AT show up where they need it instead of someplace where they don't have access to it. And then a new thing, which is a learn and try tool that Crystal is working on that will make it a lot easier to try and use and learn about some of the 50-based AT that are out there. And we'll talk more about that at the end. But in particular, if you're working with people and they start talking about one of these, it would be nice for you to be able to have an easy place to go learn about it and maybe try it. Or if you have people and you say, gee, I wonder if there's something that would be available, what's out there, you get a chance to look at that. We're trying to make that. And all of these things are all free because it doesn't, the best way to get to people and places where there are few resources is to not demand resources from them in order to do it. Now, the first thing I want to talk about before we get into the tools even is digital talent and low digital talent. And this is something that we tripped over in our work over the last 5-10 years. And it was kind of a surprise to us. It shouldn't have been, but it was. And what do we mean by digital talent? Digital talent is the ability to learn and use technology. And it's not related to IQ because I know people that are blazingly brighter than me who can't use their technology, and I can. So does that mean that I'm smarter than them? No, I wish I was. It just means that they're good with technology. And some people are good and some people aren't. And it's not really digital literacy. Digital literacy is a skill. That's your ability to learn how to use technology. I mean, it's when you use things, you get more and more skills. But digital talent is a talent. It's more like singing or athletic or artists. Among us on the call, some of us probably are just really have talent with singing. I don't. I've been married 38 years, and a few months ago, my wife turned to me and said, "You're singing on key." And I said, "Oh, you sound so surprised." And she said, "Well, I am." So that tells you where my singing talent lies or doesn't lie. Um, Athletics, some people are just natural athletics. You just envy them and want to do sometimes. Some people are artists. I can't draw. I see people pick up a pen. And so different people have different skills. And yes, I could sing and try and learn and I get a little better. I could try athletics. I could take art lessons, but I'm not going to ever have any real talent in those areas. Well, it doesn't matter to me because singing doesn't block me from getting a job. It hasn't really changed. I mean, other than going into singing. Athletics, ditto. Artists, I don't need to do that. There aren't very many jobs that require you to be an artist except art. However, that's not true of technology. We have now our education, our health systems, our communication, our social, all these systems, and we're making them all technology based. And don't have any technology talent, or if you have really, really low talent, like some people just they're tone deaf, they can't sing at all, and some people are just awkward. They're just not going to ever be good at athletics. And some people may have just they'd have no real good coordination, and they aren't able to be artists. Um, well, the same thing can happen with technology, where people just don't get technology. It just doesn't make sense to them. Now, all of us raise our hand a little bit, even those of us at the top, because we all wrestle with technology. But think about it. If we're at the top, and we're at the top, um, and we have trouble with it, think about how hard it is for the people who don't have the technology talent that we would have. And now think of not the bottom half, not the bottom third, but the bottom 5%, just the last five, the people who have the least ability to use technology at all. That's still 1 in 20 people. That's a huge portion of our population that is having trouble. And what does this look like? When somebie says, well, we had a place where they had 24 computer workstations. It was a job center. And identical. And some guy came in, he stood behind a person who was sitting at one of the computer for 20 minutes. Like almost all the other stations were empty. He stood behind this one person, and then he left. And then he came back a couple hours later, and he sat down. He was using the computer, and we went up and we asked him. He said, why did you want to use this computer? And he says, oh, I know how to use this one. And we said, well, they're all identical, And he says, I don't know about that. All I know is that yesterday, when I came in, they showed me how to do it on this computer. And so I was going to wait till this computer because I know I can use this one. People who come into a library and they plug in a USB, and then they go around looking for a librarian. And the librarian comes back and says, are you having trouble with the computer? He said, yes. And so what's the problem? And he says, well, I put my thing in here and I have my resume on it, but I don't know how to find it. And so they have absolutely no idea what file systems are, or folders, or drives. And they're trying to get a job, and they can qualify for the job if they could just edit their resume, but they have no idea how to do that. Um, we've had we think about this as being something, oh, that's older people, but our youngsters, we don't have to worry about this because they're all digital natives. And we have kids who come in who can thumb type on their thing at 2,000 miles an hour. They can type faster than I can talk. And yet they get into community colleges and they can't use the computers there. The sitting down to Windows doesn't look anything like either your Android or your Apple phone. And they don't know how to do things. They can't figure out how to use them. And yet they want to go out into the workforce, and they need to know how to use these computers. It's not that the phones and stuff aren't great for them to do what lots of things that they do. But when they go out and get a job, people are going to expect that they don't think that a Windows is a completely foreign thing, and they have to sit down and look like they don't know even where to start using it. And that's what we find. We found people in community colleges at one of the leading nationwide leading community colleges who come in and they flunked out of English class because they couldn't figure out how to use the computers, and there was a computer on each desk, and that's how they were teaching the class. As a matter of fact, the teacher gave up after a while and told everybody just ignore the computers, and started doing everything on handing out paper and pencil and yellow markers and red pens, and having people do all of the work and mark up and stuff on paper, because she spent all of her class going from one student to another student to another student to another student to another student, all trying to help them figure out where to find things. And they came in at the next class, and they came to the next class, and it just kept repeating over. And she spent her entire class not teaching, but trying to help people figure out how to use their computers. So this isn't something that's only for some section. It's all ages, from the young to the old. This ability, some of us are going to be really good techies, and some people really aren't. And we need to pay attention, because the people at the bottom may be struggling, and we may not know why. And they may not ever say why, because everybody else uses it, and they feel stupid, and they're not. Remember, this is a talent, not intelligence, but they're feeling stupid and because they can't use the technology. And so they never say anything and they just have trouble. And so we want to be paying attention. The other thing we hear a lot, and we even hear it at our research university, the major research university for the University of Maryland, at Maryland, I mean. And I heard a student sit down to a computer and we were talking about it. And she said, well, whenever I sit down to a computer, the first thing I think about is, am I going to break it? And I'm going, what? You're going to break it. And they just say, I just don't know. They just don't understand. And it gets worse. One of the things we found is that people who have any trouble using the computer, let's say the fonts are too small and things like this, there's a whole bunch of features built into the easier to use. And they're all in the control panels or settings panels. And an amazing percentage of the people we talk to are afraid to go into the settings panel. First of all, some of them just don't even know the features are there. And so as we're doing this today, you may say, oh, I didn't know that was there. And you're in very good company. We even have people who are supposed to help people use computers at library. Their job is to help people use computers, and they didn't know the features were there. Okay. Secondly, they're so hard to get to. You got to go into the control panels. You have to muck around. You find it one time and you go back the next time and then you can't find it. And people say it's just so much work. They'd rather lean over and squint at the screen than to have to try and go find these things to turn them on. And then they have to go find them, turn them back off again. And the third thing is that they're in the settings panels and people are afraid to go in there. Asking people to go into the settings panel, the control panels, to change the settings to make the computer work better is like asking you to go under the hood of your car to make some changes to make no, not your car. Remember, they're at school or they're at the library. You're asking them to go under the hood of the school's car to make some changes to make the car work better for them. And I wouldn't do it because I would be afraid I would break it. Well, that's exactly how they feel about going into the control panel. And again, I asked this to a bunch of people a room full of people who were all librarians who were supposed to help people when they were having trouble using their computers. And a third of them said that they were afraid to go into the control panels. So it was like, our IT department, they don't want us messing around with the settings. Well, we put the special features to make the computer easier to use in a place that is unknown, hard to use, and people are afraid to go into. And so that's one of the things that we tried to do. So we created Morphic, and it's a free tool. It works on the Mac and Windows computers, and it makes it easier to find the features, and it makes it really easy and faster to use them. So let's take a look here. So it's on both a Mac and a PC, but there are more PCs around than Mac, so I'm going to show it to you on a PC. So let's say you have this and you're just having trouble reading this. This type up here is too small. You're having trouble reading it. The font's over here. There's something in built into the operating system called screen scaling. And what it does is it changes the scale of everything on the screen all at once. And we didn't call it screen scaling because people would be afraid to click on a button that said screen scaling. So we call it text size. But what it really does is it just resizes the whole screen. So you can see everything on the screen getting larger. And so now you see all of the text everywhere. Now, some of you know that you can go into a browser, and if you know the secret handshake, you can cause the browser contents to get larger. But that doesn't help you if you can't see anything else on the screen, and it only works in the browser, and it's not going to work on your educational programs and things like this. Whereas the screen scaling makes everything larger. The next thing is a magnifier, and it's built in, and it just gives you a nice little magnifier. So if you're having trouble just reading part of the screen, you can do this. If you don't want to blow the whole screen up. And the mouse still works. So if you want to be able to select just where you want to between the B and the S, you can do that. because it makes it large and it makes it easy to be able to do. And again, you can come over and read these over here if they're having trouble, and then you can say, well, I want to open up the screen shortcuts, and you can just double click on it, and there it opened it up. So you do have the ability to do things in this fashion. Now, the snip tool is not really an accessibility feature, but this lets you take a picture of anything on screen. So I can grab this and paste it into an email or a report. I can go to any web page. Let's say I want to go here, and I want to say, well, there was this award-winning thing, and I wanted to get a grab of that picture of that. I can just grab that picture, that little part there, and paste it into a chart. So you can grab any content from anywhere and paste it. And this is hard for some people who just can't remember all the secret keystrokes to do it, where to find it. It's hidden under notifications, and that's not a logical place, etc. The other reason we put it on there is that a lot of people don't want to use something that's, quote, for people with disabilities. And so by adding snip and dark mode and night mode, some of these other things that people think of as more mainstream, it makes the Morphic bar into more of a utility bar than into a disability bar. And that's what we want to do, is we want to have it be something that everybody feels they can use. And when they use it, they don't feel like they're doing anything except using the features that are there for everybody to use. Now, the next one is read selected. And with this, you can select any text anywhere and then click read.
Why unnoticeable to full absence of color perception? Color blindness is usually an inherited problem or variation in the functionality of.
And it'll read it to you aloud. And you can right click on here and go to settings. And this actually takes you into the control panels. But because it drops you right where you need to be, it's not so scary. And you can change the speed. So you say, oh, that's just too fast for me. I can slow it down, and you can change it to be another voice or a woman's voice or whatever you want. I'll change it to Microsoft David now, and come back and select select some text. And then you can see it'll read it slower.
Bright light, called the photopic region, as opposed to rod cells, which work better in dim light.
And you can go from there. So now this is really great for anybody who has a reading problem. They have low vision. They just have trouble reading a long time. People have dyslexia. With dyslexia, when you look at the letters, what you see is the letters all jumping up and down and switching places with each other, kind of a thing. So you can kind of decipher and read, but it's really slow. But what's even worse is if you try to write something, how many people have written an email and never had to go back and reread it for any typos? I've not yet met anybody who answered that they did not have to go back. Now imagine that as soon as you type, the letters disappear, and you have to send this email off to your boss, but you have no ability to go back and proofread anything that you wrote. That would be pretty scary, and you probably would not write very often, and you would be careful what you wrote, and you wouldn't ask questions a lot and things like this, because you'd be afraid that you'd be sending something off that would make you look bad. Well, if you have trouble reading and the letters are jumping around, imagine trying to proofread, okay? You're now not just trying to figure out what the words are on the page. You're trying to figure out if any of them have the wrong letters in them in the wrong order. And it's really hard. So with this, they could just write their letters, write their whatever, and they can just highlight their email they wrote, click, and it reads it back, and any typos just jump out at you. I've actually done it a few times myself when I was writing one, because when I read what I typed, sometimes I read what I think I typed, and I don't actually notice that I typed the wrong word. And I have a habit of typing not and now in swapped with each other. So I'll say it's not something when it's now something. Really bad thing to have confusion, but they jump out. So this is really handy. Now there's a read selected in Word, there's one in Edge, there's one in OneNote. They're all from Microsoft, and they all work differently, and they don't work anywhere else. So if you have any other browser, you have any educational programs, you have anything else, content, they don't work. And so this one was provided so it would work everywhere. this is the only feature. All of these other features are just standard features built right into Windows. This is the only feature we have where we actually created a special feature out of the components that's already in Windows. So it's just, we took the parts of Windows and glued them together to make this one. On the Mac, they have a read selected, so we just use it there. And we hope to get that built in, so it's as well. Now, contrast is provided for individuals who have trouble with low vision and they needed to have higher contrast. But we actually found that some of the people who had migraines said that they found they had fewer migraines because of using it in this kind of a form. And I said, well, why don't you just use dark mode? And they said, well, you can use dark mode, but it's sort of some things go dark and some things don't. So they found the other one to be better. Now, the next thing, if I can go back to our color blindness here, is there's like 14% of males have some type of color blindness. For women, it's like 1 in, instead of 1 out of 14, it's 1 out of 200 or 300. So for some reason, it's a male thing, not a female tied characteristic. But if you have it and you have color-coded charts, this is a problem. So most of the time it doesn't matter, but if you have color-coded charts, and this lets you just turn on color filters that shift the colors. And again, I can go into settings and I can pick the type of color blindness that I have, and you can see the colors all change differently depending upon what kind of color blindness you have. You can also see that these are just turning that feature on, because if I click here, watch the switch right here in the control panel, you can see that all I'm doing here is turning the feature on and off that's already there. Okay. Only instead of having to go in and try and find out where this is, it's just right here and available to me. And then there's other features. So, mouse settings, pointer size. A lot of people, this is great, by the way, all the teachers should be shown this one because they're always using their little cursor to point to things and nobody can see where the cursor is. And they just click on this and they can then adjust their cursor size to be whatever size is going to be useful in the class. And if they don't like it that way the rest of the time, they can always go in and change it back just as easily. As a matter of fact, all of the accessibility features are available right here, all accessibility features, and it drops you right in there and it makes it really easy to find all of them that are in there. So that's the Morphic bar. And again, it shows or hides. There's a little icon you see in the bottom tray here to make it show. If it's on the computer, you don't want it, you can just click here. You can click on the little guy to make it go away. But it's a really handy little thing for people to have and makes it very easy to use these built-in accessibility features. So that's the first one. I'm going to stop for a second just to see if anybody had any questions about this before I go on.
There's no questions in the chat, but if you have a question, go ahead and unmute and ask. Okay. By the way, to get it, you can just go to morphic.org. You can see it here, morphic.org. We can put that in the chat. And then you just click on Get Morphic Free, and here it is. There's for the Mac, and here's for Windows. You click Downloads, it installs in like 8 seconds. It's very quick, small, and it works on any computer, any Mac or PC. Also, for those of you that want to just grab it out of the chat box, Crystal put the link to that, so it's right there.
Thank you. Okay. So how can this be useful in vocational evaluations? Well, first of all, if you're doing a vocational evaluation, it can make the computer easier for the clients to use. We've had vocational counselors say they have people come in and they need magnifiers on their computer and they're squinting at and they're trying to do the evaluation. It's kind of like asking them to do the evaluation with but don't use your glasses. And it's like, well, that's going to be harder. So by putting this on the computer can make it easier. Also, you can make clients aware of the features that are already built into the computers they already have. So we have lots of people, and then if they go, yeah, but it's buried, I didn't even know it was there. And the answer is yes, you can get this. Yes, while they're sitting there in front of you, you can even show them how to download it and put it on their computer. Okay. Now, assistive technology on demand. So there's a bunch of things that are built in, and this is really great because it's free. It's on all the computers. It's, that the kids are using no matter where they are. And so if they don't have a computer, they can go to the library and use the computer there and the built-in features. And if you have Morphic installed on all the computers at the library and the community center and the school, then whatever the computer these people sit down to, they are able to use these features on those computers easily. And so we really encourage, since it's free and all it does is make the stuff that's already built in. You don't even have to be connected to the internet for that to work. For the Morphic bar to work, because all it's doing is, other than when you download it, all it's doing is just turning the features on that are built into Windows. So if you're on the internet, off the internet, doesn't matter. This thing's going to work because the features work because they're all built right into the operating system. Okay.
Greg, we actually have a couple questions.
Yeah,
We
go
had
ahead.
so Tammy joined a little bit late, but she asked the question, will this help those who've been diagnosed with dyslexia? You did talk about that just a little bit, but is there anything more you want to say in answering that question?
Yes, it can help people with dyslexia because they have trouble, as we said before, reading because the letters are jumping around. And they can just highlight any place they can highlight text, including what they wrote. And then they can just click on this.
Banana is an elongated, edible fruit.
Have it read to them, and they can adjust the voice and the reading speed. So yes, it's very helpful for dyslexia. And then, as I said before, for writing, it's even more important because when they write, it's hard for them to proofread their own stuff, and they can highlight it and have it read too. So.
Thanks, Greg. The other question is from Brandy, and Brandy asks, can you apply this technology to driving? Brandy, do you want to unmute and just elaborate on that a little bit?
You mean driving?
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, great. I just, in my experience with working with some of my clients in vocational rehabilitation, I would sometimes meet the client out in the field somewhere, and I had several that drove. And this is a crazy story, but I met a client one time, and so we're talking, and just out of the blue, he says, "Miss Brady, I'm going to be honest with you. I can't see a thing." And I said, "Didn't you drive here?" And he said, "Yes, ma'am. I can see enough to make out a stop sign. I can see a red figure, and I know what a stop sign looks like." And he goes through this long scenario of how he can figure things out while he's driving. And he said, "But I really can't see a thing." And when you were going through this technology, I thought, oh my gosh, that would be, if you could put it in the glasses, you could put on driving glasses and use it to drive. That would be incredible.
Yeah, other than getting better prescription glasses, at a certain point, of course, if he did an evaluation or something, or they took him in, he might have trouble getting the eye exam part of the driving test. Do you know there's no definition of being legally deaf or legally physically disabled, or there's the only one is blindness, that you have a legal definition of blindness. And the only reason there is because if you don't pass it, they won't give you your driver's license. So there's a legal definition of blindness only because of driving. Well, this obviously isn't going to something on the computer isn't going to help with the driving. But there are glasses that help. There are also glasses that have little telescopes in them if they need to be able to like read signs but presumably he'd pull over to the side of the road and then use
Yeah.
a little, like a little, like almost telescope, and to read the signs, but not try and drive down the road doing that.
Thank you,
Thank
Brandy.
you. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Brandy, for that question. Greg, so Maria is asking, is there any voice to text features?
We'll do that next. Actually, right now, both Windows and Mac have a voice to text built into them already. Okay. Particularly in the Mac, I'm more familiar with the Mac right now on it. And as these things, they were just a little bit not ready for prime time, but we're now going to be adding them, for example, so that you could click here and turn it on. That's something, if you need it, you don't turn it on and off, on and off, on and off while you're using it. So we wouldn't put it in the bar necessarily, but put it up here so that you could turn it on. And yes, you could completely control the computers. And Microsoft mentioned at a conference just recently that they were releasing, and it was either this month or next month, an enhanced voice access feature in Windows. So that'll be even better at not only speech to text, but actually controlling the entire computer with speech. And you can also do that on the Mac, where you can dictate. If I just go over to the Mac here for a second and I drop out and I just open up a document here. Let me just get a new doc. And so this is an example of me talking to my Macintosh computer, and the Macintosh computer is in fact typing everything that I say, period. Ironically, you will notice that it misspelled its own name, period. It spelled its name as if it were an apple that you eat rather than an Apple computer, which is actually spelled Macintosh.
That was great.
Okay. So so that's speech to text, and that's built right into the Mac, and PC has one. But there's also a feature built in that lets you actually control the whole computer from there as well. Okay.
Thank you, Greg.
All right. All right. So now let's say that you have somebody who needs more. Now, the built-in feature I showed you is useful for dyslexia, and it's free and it's built in and stuff. But there are other tools that provide more assistance. For example, it'll highlight the words as they're being read, or it'll put a line so when they're reading, they can tell which line is being read, and a whole bunch of other supports, explaining what words mean, helping with idioms for people who have who speak English as a second language. And we use things like, that's a horse of a different color. And if I said that's a cow, that's a different colored cow, you'd go, what's a different colored cow? What do you mean it's a different colored cow? But a horse of a different color just means, well, that's a completely different thing in English. But for anybody who doesn't know that idiom, it's like saying it's a different colored cow, and they go, what are you talking about different colored cows for? I mean, we're not even talking about cows. We were talking about a problem I was having in school, and the fact that this was somebody who was not showing up on time because they were sick. And you said, oh, that's a horse of a different color. And you go, well, I don't have any idea what you're talking about. So those kinds of things might be built into assistive technologies that are not built into the computer. So let's say you have somebody who has dyslexia, who's having reading trouble, and they really need to have a more powerful tool. And they go to the state and they go to an evaluation, and people say, this is the tool you need. And the state says, I'll pay for this tool. And you say, great. And it runs on a computer. And the person doesn't have a computer, so can you give them a computer? And they say, oh, no, we won't buy the computer, but we'll buy the AT. And you go, well, this person can't go to school without the AT. I mean, well, they can, but they're not going to be able to learn very well. And it's not their fault. It's like having low vision and you say, well, we'll give you a pair of glasses, but you can't wear, we'll give you the lenses, but we won't give you the glasses. You know, we only pay for lenses. We don't pay for frames. And the frames cost, you know, more than the glasses do. So they have the AT. They don't have a computer to run it on. Nobody will give them a computer to run it on. They can't go to school and use it on the school's computers because the school won't let them install software. They can't go to the library that all the other kids in the classroom go after school to use computers because the library won't let them install their AT. So it's basically they have AT, they need AT, but they can't use it anywhere. So AT on demand is a free feature of Morphic that lets your assistive technology follow you to any computer you encounter. So for example, any computer at the school, any computer at the library, any computer at the community center. And so without it, imagine you're someone who needs AT and you don't have one. There's lots of computers at the library and you can't use any of them. You keep encountering computers at schools, labs, community centers, doctors' offices, government services. You go into a job center and you can't use any of them either because you need AT and all these computers don't have the AT that you need. They may have a computer in the corner or in one room that has two AT, but those aren't your AT, so they don't help you either. So with AT on demand, anytime a person who needs AT sits down to any computer, the AT they need shows up, is installed on that computer and set up just for them. Okay? So when they go to school, they can go into the classroom, they can sit down at any computer, at any desk, and their AT shows up. After school, they don't have a computer at home or they don't have internet at home. They can go to the community center, sit down to any computer, their AT shows up on that computer. And when they're done, it all disappears. So they sit down to a computer at the library, the AT shows up. So suddenly, all these computers that they saw in all these different locations, they suddenly can use any one of them because they can sit down to them, their AT shows up. It's not only shows up, but it's set up just the way they need to have it set up. And then when they're done, it disappears. Okay. And so this is a game changer for all who need AT. But it's the only way people who need AT and don't have their own computer will be able to access computers. And it's really their only chance for digital equity with their peers. And as we said at the beginning, if you don't have the ability to use the computers and stuff that your peers do, and they have access to computers, you don't have access to computers, you're just going to be at a complete disadvantage all the way through. Even jobs that aren't done on a computer usually require you to use a computer. First of all, you have to apply on the computer often, and then for reporting and for communication and for everything else. So being able to use computers is pretty important.
Greg, we have a question from Brandy. Go ahead and unmute Brandy and ask your question.
Sorry, this is fascinating me. So you're saying it's going to follow, the AT is going to follow the individual, so they can use it anywhere. But, universities usually have a career center or somewhere that you can go to get help anyway. So do the universities have this software available, in their career? It's a career center or something like that. It's called something like that. And do they have the technology available at the school?
Yes. So the University of Maryland, Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois are putting it on all of the computers everywhere. It doesn't do any good when you have a class and you have to go to class and they're going to teach on the computer. It doesn't do any good that there's a computer over in some resource building on the other end of campus that you can use. You're in class. You need to use this computer. At night, when you have to do homework, the library is open. Is that resource center that, is that going to be open? And, can you go
Right.
there? Do they have all the library books that you need to have when you're using your computer? So the
Right.
key isn't that there isn't some computer someplace that you could use. And by the way, most of those places only have, we're talking about over 50 types of AT, of computer-based AT, and those places usually have 3, and if you don't need anything besides those 3, you're out of luck.
Right.
So, and
So
so,
they aren't aware, the career centers or the disability centers, whatever they call them, they're not aware of this software. Is that what you're saying?
well, at the universities I talked about, they're aware because it's not only at their place, but it's also on all the other computers on campus.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the goal is you put Morphic on all the computers, and then anytime somebody sits down to any computer, their AT will show up.
Yeah.
Um, and we're talking about
That's a way
reading.
to reach the people that, you were saying earlier, the people that may not want to use the software because they think it's geared toward someone with a disability instead of just software, period. But if it's on every computer and every person can use it, that's a way to reach the people that, that wouldn't have used it before.
Yes. Now, with AT on demand, we don't put all the AT on all the computers. Okay. None of the computers have AT on them. But with AT on demand, what happens is whenever the person sits down to a computer, Morphic says, "Oh," they sign in, and it says it has a little profile in the cloud of what they need, and it then says, "Oh, this person needs JAWS, or this person needs read and write." So it goes and it gets a copy, not from the cloud, because the university was never allowed that. It goes and gets a copy from the university's IT department. What we take is we have a bundle of all the different AT install packages. And so we give it to the university. The university puts it on their server after they make sure it's all secure and safe. And now when anybody sits down to any computer at the university, that has Morphic on it, Morphic will say, "Oh, they need this AT." It gets a copy off of the university server, installs it on that computer, and sets it up for that person. And then when they're done, it's gone again. So the computer's back like it was before, and there's no AT on it, except the stuff that's obviously built into the operating system. So it's like whenever you sit down to a computer, you have your pair of glasses you can use. And when you get up and leave, the next person doesn't have to look at the screen through your glasses because you took them with you. But you have your glasses and they show up. So this would be like a virtual pair of glasses, if you will, an assistive technology. And whenever you sit down on the computer, it appears. And when you leave the computer, it disappears. So it's not going to interfere with anybody else's use of the computer. But it does allow you to sit down and use any of the computers. You have computers in the classroom, it shows up there. You have computers in the homeroom, it shows up there. You have computers in the resource center, it shows up there. You have a tutoring program that's got 4 computers over there, your AT shows up there. It shows up wherever you need it to show up when you're there, and then it disappears when you're done.
So
Is that-
Greg, I just want to do
Yeah.
just a little bit of a, I don't know, plug or announcement right now, and just say that one of the things we're hoping to do is work with tribal communities, libraries, colleges, to get Morphic into those communities so that the same thing can be happening in tribal communities. And remember, this is free. There's not a cost to it. And so there's a question in the chat. So is this available to individuals in any state? The Morphic that Greg is talking about in the first section, where you can go install it on your own computer, that is obviously available to anyone, anywhere. But AT on demand would mean that if there is an IT department that requires things go past them, or the tribal, leadership wants to make sure things are vetted before they're used, then Morphic wouldn't be on those things until that process happened, and then it was there available to be used. So our hope is that as we learn about this, and Greg and Crystal, bring this to attention and how it can be done, that we can get this into the hands of tribal communities in all of the states.
The goal is to have this on have Morphic on every computer in every school, in every library, in every community center, in every tutoring program, everywhere in the United States, and then Europe, and then the world. It's free. There's no reason for it not to be there. And it just is so much, it is so valuable in making people aware of what's available and making it so that it's easy to use and making it so they feel safe using it, where they don't feel safe, digging around in the control panels. Now, AT on Demand also is free. Now, the AT isn't necessarily, not all these programs that we show on here, on this slide, like Read and Write and Kurzweil and stuff, these are all programs that you buy, except NVDA. Now, NVDA is free. It's a screen reader that's available free. So you don't have to pay for AT on Demand. But if it's going to install a program, then somebody has to have a license to the program. We're not going to steal commercial programs and install them on computers for people to use. However, if you're a school and you say, well, I don't have any money for any of these AT, you could install Morphic on all your computers, and you'd have the Morphic bar. You'd also could have AT on demand for free at your school, and any AT that somebody had a license to. So that would mean anytime a student was given a license to JAWS, for example, which costs like, $1,000 or close to it, $800-900, whatever it costs today, by the state or by a rehab program or something, they could walk into your school and sit down to any computer and use it, and it would show up on that computer, and there's no cost to your school at all, or your rehab program or your whatever, because they had the license, they owned it, they walked in. It's just that this would be a safe way for them to use it on your computer, and a way that your IT department can support. Your IT department cannot allow somebody to walk in with a copy of an AT and sit down to any computer and install it, because that would mean that anybody could sit down and install software, and your place would be full of viruses in a week. But this is a way that is free to the school. It's safe. It works with the IT department, and it allows anybody who has a legal license, a legal right to use it, or they're using a program like NVDA, which is already free and you don't need a license to use, to be able to walk in, sit down to any computer and be able to use that AT. So, by the way, anybody afterwards, will provide our contact. You could say, I heard everything you said, but this is all new to me. Could you do that again? Crystal or I will be happy to talk to you afterwards, one-on-one, in a phone call or a Zoom call. And if you're interested in doing this, we'd be happy to help you to look at this in more detail. Also, if you say, well, gee, I'd like to do this at my school, but I have these 3 other people that have got to sign off or have got to buy into it, and my IT department. And then we would say, absolutely, just give us a call and we'll set up a call like this. And we really encourage you to make sure you include your IT department with you when you do this, because of 2 things. One, you're going to have to go back and do it again later anyway, because they've never seen anything like this before. And so when you describe it, they're going to say, no, they can't. You couldn't have understood it properly. They'll tell you, you don't know, it can't be done safely. So you want them there for that. The other reason is IT departments are are like secretaries used to be in the olden days, and they were people that really held the place together, but they don't get they get treated like staff, like like almost janitorial. You go to them when you need something. Um, Bringing them in up front so that they are part of is seen as being and feel like they're part of the team that's trying to help the students is makes them be much more willing to try and tackle and add things because they feel like they're part of the team that's solving a problem versus the people that are just told what they're supposed to do because you're solving the problem. So that's just so I really encourage you to get your IT department people on the call. And we'd be happy to call with any. You say, well, there's only 3 of us. You're going to do a whole call for 3 of us? We do a whole call for 1 of you. Okay. So anything. And we're really interested in trying to get this into rural and tribal locations. We have places where there are 69 students between kindergarten and high school. There's only 69 students. So there's, like 4 classrooms and everything's taught out of 4 classrooms for all 14 grades. So we really need to be trying to figure out how to get these things because this is the only path that any of these places that are really small like that have as an opportunity for doing this because they don't have any special AT people and things. So that's a part of what we're doing, and that's what we're really looking at. So feel absolutely welcome to call us. You can't bother us. Okay. Any other questions? I'll go on. Okay. As I said, our goal is to have Morphic on every public shared use computer in the world. And that would mean that anybody, when you're traveling, you could sit down to any computer in any state. And again, we're starting here and trying to work out. We want to make sure that we've reached all the rural areas and distant areas here before we decide to go flying off other places. But eventually, it ought to be that if you need AT, if anybody else can sit down on the computer and use it, you should be able to sit down on the computer and use it, just like everybody else. Now, in Voc rehabs, if a person shows up for an evaluation and they need AT, you may have your evaluation software on one computer and they have their AT on their computer, and now you have a choice. How are they going to do the evaluation? The AT is like their glasses, and it doesn't do any good to be on their computer but not yours. But with Morphic, with AT on demand, you could have any AT that they have be temporarily on your evaluation computer, set up for them, and then when they're gone, it disappears. Okay. So this was one of the comments that was made by one of the people, and they just said that that would be so much easier because it lets them test their clients with the best setup for them. And also, if they find that modifications would change, you can have those immediately transferred as well. Okay. So any questions on AT on demand before we go forward?
None right now, unless
Okay.
someone wants to unmute and ask a question.
So the last thing is a learn and try tool. So this is for to make it easier for people to learn and to try these different AT. And I'm going to toss this over to Crystal because she's actually leading the development of this. So I'm going to have her present on this. So I'm going to stop sharing and toss it over to Crystal.
Okay, excellent. Give me 1 second. Greg, actually, would you mind sharing and just clicking next, and I'll tell you when
Yep,
to move
I will
over to
do
the
that.
next slide.
I will
Yeah.
definitely do that.
Thank you very much.
Let me get it back up and share. Okay.
Okay. Thank you everyone for joining today. So I'm going to be talking about the Learn and Try tool. So imagine a client comes in and is using an AT that you're not familiar with. Or how about a situation where, a client might need an AT, but you're not sure what specific AT they might need. So what if there was a way that you could quickly learn about a different AT, explore its different features, and also have a variety of different AT at your fingertips to try it with your clients. And then you are also able to get a quick overview and also a more in-depth one of different AT that are out there. And so next slide, please, Craig. So this is all going to be possible with the new Learn and Try tool. So it's a new free tool that's going to help any individual, so counselors, clinicians, teachers, AT users themselves, learn about and try different kinds of AT. It's designed to be a very comprehensive resource and provide a sort of like one-stop shop where you can both learn about and try all the different kinds of AT, software-based AT. Next slide. So how might this be useful to vocational workers or counselors? Firstly, it allows you to learn about any of over 50 computer-based AT that clients might be using or that might potentially benefit them. And then also, it would allow you to explore and try out these technologies yourself so you can have firsthand experience using these tools. Next slide, please. So during the research process, we got some really great feedback from evaluators on different features they'd like to see in the software, or in the tool, I should say. And so the first thing is organizing the AT by cost or type of disability. So for example, having a filter for free AT or maybe AT that requires a sort of a payment, and also organizing it by maybe dyslexia or ADHD. And the next thing that they asked to see would be letting individuals, so not just people in evaluations, but even say a person that doesn't know if they need AT or not, if they can use this tool to be able to see different AT that might work for them, even if they don't identify as having a disability, they can just see all these different AT and figure out if this is something they want to use in their day-to-day life. And the next feature that that was mentioned was a community support group. So having a network of people to ask questions and get and learn from each other, whether that's different evaluators, different therapists, and help problem solve if there's a client and maybe there's something that they don't know is a problem that a client is facing. They're not really sure what tool would be beneficial for that client. So having a group to ask questions to was another feature that they wanted to see. And then the last one is working offline. So sometimes there are places where internet isn't always stable or consistent. So it would be great. Evaluators had mentioned in research whether to have something that can work offline, so that way they can access this tool anywhere, no matter if they're online or not. And that's it for the Learn and Try tool. Does anyone have any questions on that? I'll give you a minute or two if you want to unmute or pop some questions in the chat.
So one question I have is where are you at in the process of putting the Learn and Try tool together? Is it ready? Are you still creating that? Where are you with that?
That's a great question. So right now we are developing the designs for the Learn and Try tool. And we collected some feedback from evaluators, but obviously we're trying to make sure that everyone's feedback is incorporated. So, or if anyone even has suggestions today, we're happy to hear and see if there's anything that we probably missed. We're not the experts here. This tool is going to be developed for you all, not for us. So we'd love to hear any feedback, but we're designing it at the moment, and then it will be sent over to be coded and actually developed from a back end. And then, Greg, when would the tool be ready for public use, would you think?
So the plumbing, the hard parts to make it work all exist now. What we're looking at is what the interface should look like. By the end of the summer, we will have a version 1 of it up. And we would like, if there are some people who say, well, I would like to try it, early and be able to contribute to it. There's two parts to that. One of them is that You can let Crystal know she's doing some focus groups where we'll be showing the interface, and you can say, well, you know, that looks really easy, or I don't understand it, or gee, could you make it do this? Could you make it do that? And that we'd like you to do, you know, in the next month or two, because then we'll be, you know, if you will, freezing the interface as we, you know, finish it up. We always make changes, you know, a year out, 2 years out, but it's always easier to make it before you, to change your recipe before you bake the cake. Let's put it that way. And so by the end of the summer, we will have them that will be doing field testing and stuff like this. And then it'll be a continual evolution process from there. So it'll, quote, never be done. But if you want it the first time, you'll actually have something that you could actually use. It would be the summer, the end of the summer.
Thank you for that information in the chat, Crystal. You can see that if you'd like to be a part of that testing group, field testing group, you can let Crystal know. And Crystal did put her email and Greg's email in the chat box. I know you guys probably were going to do this, but I'm going to highlight that Greg and Crystal will be at the IHD conference the first week of June in Phoenix.
Yep.
That conference is just before the KNAR conference, same place, same location, all of that. And so if you can make it to the IHD conference, that would be a great place to connect with them and to also receive more information.
We will also be at the WIEA, the Wisconsin Indian Education Association Conference in Lac du Flambeau on the 25th and 26th of April. So we will, for those, I know at least one of you is from northern Wisconsin, so we'll be there. We'll actually have a little table, so you'll be, it'll be easy to find us there. You can get information at morphic.org. There's info at morphic.org, by the way, that instantly goes to both Crystal and me. So if you forget our email addresses, you can always just go info@morphic.org. This is a presentation, so it's hard to copy off the screen, but if you aim your camera at that QR code, that'll open up the Morphic website for you as well.
And I'm also going to add at the WIEA conference, we're going to be vendors, so feel free to stop by our table.
Yep.
That's great, Crystal. So does anybody who is on the Zoom meeting want to see any more demonstration of Morphic? Maybe you thought there was an area Greg maybe went a little quick, or you came in a little late. Anyone want to see any more demonstration?
Or have any other questions? Oh, so it looks like Kim is in Lac du Flambeau and will be at IHD too. So we'll be seeing a lot of Kim.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else, Greg or Crystal, that you want to share today? It doesn't look like we have any more questions unless someone just maybe forgot to unmute when you were asking a question. Anything else?
Just two things. One of them is download Morphic and put it on your computer. It's free. You may find it amazingly useful. Also, think about anybody else you know that may have trouble seeing computers, or they're getting older and things like this. We found an amazing number of people who have found it really useful. Or even if at the end of the day your eyes are just tired, it's such an easy way to make everything larger on the screen and then smaller again for the next morning when your eyes are working better. Kind of a thing. So we really encourage that. And the Learn and Try tool, the goal of that also is to make it really easy to, for example, next to each of the AT, just by pointing to them, it'll pop up a little, couple, like 2 sentences to say what it is. So you just point to things and see what they are. You can click on, there's going to be like a 10-second video. So you can just explore. You could say, oh, I have somebody who's got trouble seeing. And so I see you got a section here where you put all of the grouped all the things for people with visual, and you just click on them and you can just see what's out there. And then you may just say, I think some of these would be valuable. You ought to go to get an evaluation or go to the state. Every state has an AT program. The EverTech is, there to provide technical assistance. So if you see something that looks like it's helpful, the biggest problem we find is that people who need help never ask for it because they assume there isn't anything. They just, their whole life it's been, I've never been able to use stuff. I've never been able to see stuff. It's their expectations, a kind of a learned helplessness that we all have. And we see this as you get out more rural, they just don't expect that anything will be there for them. And so they don't think that there might be a solution. So we really encourage to just ask people or look around and see that people might be having. And then the other one, of course, is anybody who's having trouble reading and stuff like this. A lot of times they don't even ask for help because they know they can't read, because they know they're stupid. They've been told they were stupid their whole lives. Everybody else can read and they can't. So it's obvious that they're stupid, and they're not. They just have dyslexia. They just have a reading problem. They may have different things, and that doesn't need to stand in the way of all of their other learning and skills. And there's so many people that have great skills and they may not be great on computers, or they may have some type of a barrier. So that's what we're trying to create. And finally, anything about any of our stuff, we have really thick skins and big ears. So think of us as big-eared, thick-skinned creatures, which means that if there's anything you don't like or that doesn't work, or you could say, oh, I'm just so grateful for having something like this, and I don't want to question, or criticize it. That doesn't help us make it better. So please, we love criticism. That's the only reason that this thing is like it is now, is because of all of the critiques and input we've gotten from others before now.
Thank you so much, Greg. We have a question from Jana. Go ahead, Jana.
Yeah, I know that this is probably down the road, but as you said, that people get used to using a device or a system. Many of our clients have access to iPads or tablets or their phone. Many of them are carrying their phone around. So I was just wondering, is this going to be at one day put onto a phone so that they'll be used to this, and it's an amazing or app, whatever, I don't know what to call it, but is it going to be ever usable on a phone or a tablet device?
Excellent question. Two things. One is also Chromebooks. We're working with Google. We're trying to get it on the Chromebooks. If you ever talk to anybody from Google, just tell them, oh, we'd really like to have it. It helps when they hear it from the community. Interestingly, with Chromebooks, you can't add it. It has to be part of the operating system. So if it ever appears on Chromebooks, it'll appear on every Chromebook all at once. So, it'll be either nobody will have it or it'll be everywhere. So that's great. For Android and iOS, we can't do it because the architecture of those things is that every app is in its own little sandbox. So it can't affect anything else. So we can't have an app that even turns on the features built into the operating system, because we're sandboxed from those two. But we are talking to Apple and Google about trying to move these kind of features in. Do want to tell you, however, that you should explore all the iOS, for example, and Android has another array, but iOS has a massive array of assistive technology features built into their phone. Because it is, sandbox like this, you can install all sorts of types of AT. So they've gone out of their way to build a whole bunch in. And there's one they just came out with that's just months old, so I want to make you all aware of it. And that's a program to simplify the interface. And especially if you have older people, I highly recommend this. So you go into accessibility, and then it's called assistive access. It's real down near the bottom. And it lets you make it much simpler than they sort of strip out a lot of things to make it a lot simpler for older people. And then we've just suggested some additional features to add to that to make it even simpler yet. So I wanted you to be aware of it because nobody, even people in the AT area, are not very much aware of it.
Thank you for that. Great question, Jenna.
Yeah, thank you.
Crystal, you put in the chat, I have a question. Was that you
Yeah,
had?
it was actually a question for the audience, but let me just put I'm just putting in the link for the assistive access, if anyone wants to read more about it. I think that's the link on the Apple website. So yeah, I had a question for the audience. So one of the things we were curious about was the AT use in your individual communities. And so if anyone would like to unmute or put in the chat the different situations that they might see, so we get like an idea of the spectrum of different environments. And like, for example, one of the things that we've seen with AT use, like I was working with a participant whose organization only had like one AT that they could provide to their students. And so things like that, if you know what AT are being used, or if there are any, what barriers there might be to AT use, it would be great if you guys want to provide that information just so we know. That'd be really helpful.
Yeah, barriers, problems, as well as what AT you use. Anything about that would be helpful. Anybody want to talk about AT in their community? One of the things that we know.
Also, you guys have the ability to email them. So if right now it's not coming
Yeah.
up, you,
Right.
if it does later, please feel free, I'm sure, to reach out to Crystal or Greg or both of them and let them know.
And it's really helpful for you to say, we really don't have any AT because I mean that you feel like you're confessing something, but I'll tell you that when we go out to all of the rural schools of all types, and we find that they basically there's nothing in lots of these places. It's extremely common, and it's just resources. There are just so few resources. But it's helpful to say we don't have it, but here's the reasons we don't have it. Anything that helps us to better understand helps us to figure out how to better do it. Also, if you say this all looks fine, but I don't think it would work in our area because that helps. And it may be, you could say, well, because of people, or you could say because of this or because of that. Yeah, excuse me.
Bless you.
Yeah.
Jana, Regina.
Yeah, go ahead.
One reason I brought up the phones is because that's usually what we put the AT on. And for us, the biggest barrier is access to internet and getting them service to the areas that they're in. Even in where we're pretty urban rural area, we still have issues with getting access. So where you're talking about the schools and the libraries and things like that, a lot of our kids are still using the computers and things at their schools because that's usually where they're getting access to the service. But we are using some of the things that you've said on through their phones, their phones, what they already have, the text to speech and things like that. Some of the simple things that we are using with our clients, for AT. And so this would be added in an additional thing that we could get out to even our younger group of people that might not have access to a phone or, so I see it kind of being that starting point for some of our younger kids to start that might not have access to some of the things that we're able to provide to some of our older individuals in our communities, but also technology and having access to some of the internet and stuff is a big barrier for our communities.
Yeah, and it sounds like if the kids then have to use the computers at the schools and library, that that would be perfect for like the ATOD, because the kids who need AT, those are the computers they need to use, and their AT isn't going to be on them. So everybody in their class can use the computers but them. So that's good. Was there somebody else that had their hand up too?
Not
Okay.
right now. I do know we have just a few minutes left. So please feel free to unmute and ask a question or provide information. I want to let Greg and Crystal know that, what Jana explained is not unusual in tribal VR programs across the nation. And in some areas really remote, like Alaska, you're going to have even less access. So we're seeing that, AT is just not available in really any form in a lot of the tribal VR communities.
Well, the good news around internet access is that within the next 10 years, we're going to see like 50,000 low orbit satellites, which means that you'll be able to access the internet from basically almost anywhere on Earth. Cost is still going to be an issue, but the goal is to make it so that internet is just basically everywhere. There's no, well, they don't run a wire out here. There's no tower out here because it'll just be everywhere through these. Right now, the high orbit satellites are like thousands of miles away, and so these lower orbit ones could take a less power, so they can provide internet in ways that have never been possible, and you don't need a big dish and stuff. So that's the good news. But for places that are resource strapped, it's always going to be there. Eventually it'll be that there will be no place that you don't have internet, and it won't cost that much money. But we have the decade or two between now and then that we have to figure out how to solve these problems.
Yes. Well, thank you for that information. If you'll go ahead and stop screen share, Greg.
Yes.
I just want to let everyone know we are thrilled that you joined us today. I've heard this before, but I find it fascinating every time I hear it again. And again, I've got the personal aspect of my husband and I using it, and he uses it in his teaching. It's just an amazing tool, and I want to thank you for the time, effort, really the vision for this. And again, thank all of you for joining us today. Any final thoughts before we end the webinar?
Excellent.
All right.
Well, thank you very much. We want to thank you and thank you in advance for anybody who sends comments afterwards. Again, remember, thick skin, big ears. We really want to hear from you. And also don't be embarrassed, because we're working, as I said, with rural and schools all over the country of all types. And it's just scary how little resource there is. And this is a really hard area to do in addition to everything else and all the other demands you have. So we're trying to figure out how to do this in the ways that can allow you to help your students and your adults with the minimum amount of effort, not because you want to spend any minimum on anybody, because you have so many and there's only so few of you. So
That's
anything
great.
anything we can do to help.
We have an end of webinar survey that's on your screen. If you would please make sure that you fill this out before you leave, we would really appreciate it. It has a total of 6 questions, so make sure you scroll down. This really helps in what AverTech is doing in terms of bringing webinars to you, and I think it will also help our presenters. So thank you, everyone. We hope to see you at the IHD conference in June, and also we're doing another webinar May 8th on self-employment in tribal VR programs. So look for that announcement as it comes out. Go ahead, Jenna.
Yeah, I just wanted to say something to Greg and Crystal before you guys jumped off. Are you guys attending like the NIEA conferences, National Indian Education Conferences?
We're trying to get to as many of these conferences as we can.
Okay.
We have to look at each one in terms of whether or not it conflicts. You said conferences, how many of them are
Oh,
there?
well, it's just one. It's a national. I was just wondering, like, general.
What's the date on that one?
I'm not sure. I can look it up real quick and I can email it to you. But I was just wondering, because that is going to hit the educators and some of the teachers and principals and things like that of our K-12 system. And sometimes our colleges attend that also. So it'd be a good conference to attend.
Okay.
But I can send you, I might grab your emails.
There's Crystal put it up. It's October 9th and 12th. So yeah, we haven't gotten out that far in our scheduling yet. So yes, I think this is definitely one of the ones that would be on our agenda.
Yeah, because I think it would be great for you guys to talk with the educators. That K-12 system would be a great group to talk to.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Jana.
Thank you so much for sharing that.
If the AverTech staff and Greg and Crystal will stay on, the rest of you are free to leave. We hope you all have a great rest of your day.